Hello creeps! Andy here. Today I wanted to talk to you about Wes Craven's novel. Yes, if you did not know, in the 90s Wes Craven wrote a novel. Here it is. It is called Fountain Society. It is by Wes Craven. If you don't believe me, here's the proof. I think this was published in 99, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 99. Today I thought I would give you a little synopsis of the story and then let you know what my thoughts were, because it is, well, we'll get there. This story is about a man named Peter Jantz. He works for the army as a scientist, and he's trying to make a weapon that is very destructive that will kind of obliterate any enemy. Dissolve them into thin air. So he's working on this, but it's not quite right. There are some fundamental issues and he's trying to work through them and figure out what it is that's wrong. However, he's also simultaneously dying of cancer, so he's in a lot of pain. Then we meet his wife. So he has a wife named Beatrice, and she works with a man named Frederick Wolf. Well, Frederick Wolf runs this fountain project. So she works under Frederick Wolf, and her main goal has been to try to figure out how to reattach severed vertebrae. So she creates this thing that's kind of like DNA superglue that allows the structures of the body to heal itself, even in really sensitive places like the vertebrae. And so her goal is more biologically focused, whereas Peter's goal is more weaponry focused. Peter does not know what Frederick's project is. He has no idea what the Fountain Project is. It's like super top secret. I mean, even his wife Beatrice, who works directly under Frederick, doesn't quite really know what it is at the beginning, but I think as the story goes along, she definitely knows more than Peter does. We also, while this storyline is going, we get to meet an adulterous couple. So a man named Hans, who is married, he's having an affair with Elizabeth, this model, and they are in, I think they're in like Switzerland or something. And so the stories are very different. Peter and his crew are in the US, and then you hear about this a couple in Switzerland. We come to find that Frederick has this crazy idea of how he can actually save Peter from his cancer. Now, although Peter and Frederick are good friends, there is definitely tension between them. It kind of is pretty evident that Wolf's main reason for saving Peter is not, oh, because he's my friend. He really just wants to have this machine that can obliterate another army. So that's kind of his thought process. And then obviously Beatrice is because she loves Peter and she wants to save him. This story is really interesting. It has a lot of themes of morality, facing your own mortality. It really comments on how dangerous it is to have people be above the law, particularly people in the government in this case. It also talks a bit about playing God, you know, trying to save someone who's obviously on their last leg from cancer. I'm not going to quite go into exactly what happens. It is such a major part of the story that I really don't want to ruin it for anybody who's reading it. But just know that they really do go above and beyond to try to get Peter into a place where he can live comfortably without his cancers and also be able to work on this project. And then obviously those two plot lines that I was telling you before eventually do merge, but I'm not going to tell you exactly how, because that's the fun of the story. Now let me kind of get into what I thought of the story. So first, let me just start with the fact that I was nervous to read this. I mean, Wes Craven's obviously an amazing director, an amazing writer for films, but screenplay writing and novel writing are two completely different beasts. Like really, if you think about it, screenplay writing is kind of like the bones of a story. You have to be very precise and exact. There's no flowery language. You just have to get to the point. She walked in the fucking room, right? Whereas novel writing is obviously different. You have to keep the audience entertained, and so you use flowery language, you expand on things. They're very different beasts, right? And not that one is harder or easier than the other. They're both very difficult and challenging in their own ways. But in my mind, I didn't know if a screenplay writer could write a novel, and not that they couldn't, because I know that there are people who write screenplays and novels. Stephen King, he wrote Maximum Overdrive, which is one of my favorite films. There are plenty of those people I know that are just good at everything. So in my head, I just kind of assumed that you're either good at one or the other, although I know that there are people who dabble in both. But I was kind of nervous to pick up this novel because I knew he was such an influence in the, obviously the movie industry, that I didn't know how that would translate to a book. Let me just say, this book is so well written. I enjoyed it so much. There was not one page that I was bored, which is kind of rare in a novel because, you know, there are character development or, you know, describing the scenes or whatever that kind of pushes the plot forward but isn't there for any super entertainment purposes. I was not bored at all through this novel. I thought it was so fantastically written. It wasn't overly explained, so there wasn't so much description in it. It was kind of to the point, but it was so well written. Every part of it, every page I was engaged. I was kind of in a reading slump before reading this novel, and this kind of picked back up my love for books, and I love books that do that, kind of get you restarted on your love for reading. There were a few quotes that I wanted to talk about. You guys know that I love giving you my favorite quotes in the book. So this is where Peter is essentially dying from his cancer. He's in so much pain, and he says, by that night, he felt himself sliding, driving down a sick decline by the cold wind. He became increasingly aware of something huge and black gaping before him, sucking him toward an oblivion that was terrifying in its completeness. The pain was now incredibly intense, beyond anything that they could give him to quiet it. The pain was time's elasticizer and reagent. It stretched seconds to centuries and stroked his fear. Suddenly he felt everything he had believed in and all his heart slipping away, leaving him with only a raw desire to be delivered from this torment at any cost. To his utter surprise, he only wanted to live. Just really cool descriptions of somebody on the verge of death. I really liked this quote too, 129, and I just dropped my phone. But Elizabeth doubted if the exercise was helping. That night, as she tried to nap, she could feel his hands groping at the edges of her fatigue, fingernails scraping at the seams between waking and sleeping. I thought that was just such a cool way of describing somebody being in your subconscious and you only being able to think of them. And then 184. Okay, so this was about Frederick and Peter. And it says, the two old friends walked off together side by side. That way, Peter knew neither had to turn their back on one another. What an awesome sentence, right? They're walking side by side the way that friends would, but that's not why they're walking that way. It's so they can't turn their back on each other because they don't trust each other. Like, what a powerful line. That line tells you so much. You don't need a paragraph explaining how the friends felt for each other. All you need is that line. You know what I mean? God, I just love books so much, you guys. Okay, 334. And then this line I really liked too. So he's asking someone, I'm not going to go into who because I don't want to give anything away, but Peter's asking someone if they would do it all over again, something that they did just experience. And that person said, I wouldn't go that far. And he says, you failed Nietzsche's test. If you wouldn't live your life over, why bother to live it at all? What a powerful fucking line. Oh my god, this book was so good. Okay, so now let me get into this. It is not a horror novel. There is nothing horror about this. I mean, maybe I have a different definition of horror. This was in the horror section. And I think when you Google it online, it does say that it's a horror book, but it's absolutely not. And that kind of got me thinking, as a fan who has always loved horror, I was really surprised that I didn't know that Wes Craven had written a novel. But if it was advertised as a horror novel, I could see why people would have read it and maybe been disappointed if they were expecting something else. You know how a lot of the times, like, movies will try to say it's a horror movie and then horror fans will watch it and be like, that was not horror. Maybe that's what happened here. I'm not really sure, but not a horror novel at all. I would say that it's in a weird category in itself. It very much so revolves around the military, but it has nothing to do with war. And it very much so is science fiction in the sense of like the science aspect of the novel, but I wouldn't really call it fully a science fiction novel. It's a very interesting story. So I'm not really sure where I would put this. Maybe just like a thriller. If it were a movie, it'd probably be a drama. I don't know, but I thoroughly enjoyed this. I loved this so much and it really kept me engaged the entire time. The writing was phenomenal. Like I said, I was nervous going into it and he really blew me away. Every single chapter ended on a cliffhanger. Every page was just so interesting. So I think that this was fantastic. I had a really hard time figuring out if this was the only novel that Wes Craven wrote, because if you Google Wes Craven novels, a ton of them pop up, but so did this one. This is called Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and it's not written by Wes Craven, but it's based off of the characters that Wes Craven wrote. So if you Google Wes Craven books, this book comes up, and Wes Craven had nothing to do with this. So I had a really hard time figuring out if, well, we'll put that up later, if he had written any other novels and if they were fiction novels. I'm not really sure, but I know that this was his first novel that he had ever written. So if you guys do see this at a local bookstore, I highly suggest it. It is not horror in any way, but I think that's why I enjoyed it so much. It was a book that I would never have, if I just read the back of the cover, probably been interested in. You know, it's about the military and things like that don't usually pique my interest. However, reading this novel, I was just blown away by the plot, by the themes in there, by the writing style, everything. I just really, really enjoyed this. So I know that this is a horror channel and I usually recommend horror books, but it is Wes Craven, so I thought I would talk about this on this channel too. I just thought this was so cool, and so I would recommend it to you guys if you see it. I found this hardback in my used bookstore for $6.95. So if you guys have a chance to pick this up, I suggest it. Let me know down below if you guys have ever read this, or if you guys know if he has written any other novels. If he has, I'll definitely pick them up and give them a read because I just adored this one. Again, Fountain Society by Wes Craven. Definitely would recommend. Really awesome story. One last thing is that I didn't post on Tuesday, but I will post Sunday of this week to make up for that Tuesday video. So I will see you Sunday with another horror video. And if you want to catch me before then, you can subscribe to my new channel, which will be linked down below, and I will post there Friday. Although this Friday, I'm just posting another, like just all the books that I read in 2020. So if you're interested in that, then you can watch that video. But if you're not, I will see you Sunday with another horror video. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye guys.